past few weeks of Blue Lock chapters have just produced banger after banger. I've been really enjoying all the character moments and the setup for the upcoming Ubers or Juventus game. I'm really excited, by the way, that these chapters have established a horizon of expectations for the game between Bayern München and Ubers or Juventus. And for me personally, I also really enjoyed that a lot of what we've seen in these chapters touches on the topics I discussed in my earlier Blue Lock videos and are in many ways confirming the ideas I already had. And what I think is being set up most of all is Isagi's first major loss in the Neo Egoist League Arc, his first major loss as part of Bayern München. And I'm going to try to convince you of that over the course of this video. Hello, my name is Sean, and today I'm reviewing Blue Lock chapters 206 through 209. So chances are you're watching this because you saw one of my earlier Blue Lock videos. To be honest, the way they performed really surpassed my wildest expectations. And I just enjoyed seeing that you like them, seeing your comments, your thoughts, etc. But at the same time, all this growth has posed a bit of a dilemma for me, because I don't want to pivot to a purely Blue Lock related channel. I enjoy speaking about a lot of series, and there's still so much I want to talk about in the next few months. At the same time, I also realized that over half my audience at this point consists of Blue Lock fans, so I want to keep you satisfied. And I promise I will in the future also release more Blue Lock analysis content, but I want to focus on a few other things first. So my compromise is this: I'll try to release once a month a batch review and discussion of the most recent Blue Lock chapters, and that'll give me time to work on other in-depth videos, and those will include more Blue Lock in the future. In any case, I'd actually love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments if you like what I'm doing here and if you'd like to see me continue to discuss Blue Lock in this way. First things first, I'll start with Blue Lock chapter 206, which is essentially the Yo Hiyori chapter. Now what's interesting here is that this chapter is in many ways a parallel to the Yukimura flashback back in the beginning of the Manchester match, right? So in that case, we got a flashback to Yukimura's past, to his reasons, motivations, and then that paid off over the course of the Manchester match. And I'm really liking what Blue Lock did to Yukimura, is he's one of these characters who we didn't really get to know that much, who there just wasn't that much opportunity to flesh out after he was introduced after the second selection. So now we're getting some more insights into what drives him and some moments to really develop him as a character. And I'm really excited that Blue Lock's continuing this trend, and we're going to see something very similar with Hiyori, as it seems, in the Juventus match. So the main issue with Hiyori, his main drawback, is that he doesn't really love football. He was raised in a household where he was pressured to become a sports star, to become a #1 striker, but he never really did it for himself. And that's something that Karas also noted in a flashback we got before the under-20 match, right? Because there he said what's kind of holding Hiyori back is not his abilities, but actually his mindset. So that's kind of the conflict that we're going to resolve in some way over the course of the Juventus match. And the way I see it, there are kind of two outcomes. There's either a positive character arc or a negative character arc. Now, the positive arc would be that Hiyori learns to love football. And there's especially opportunities for that with Isagi, right? Because Isagi, over the course of especially the Neo Egoist League Arc, has been shown as someone who really loves football, who really enjoys it more and more the better he gets. Hiyori even acknowledges this at the end of chapter 208, where he says that he'd really like to love football as much as Isagi does. So that's option one. Hiyori starts loving football and improves as a player in that way. The second option, which I find more interesting, but at the same time I also think is a bit less likely, is that Hiyori will get a negative character arc. What I mean by this is that his flaw, his lack of love for the sport, is something that's going to hold his team back and maybe even result in a catastrophic defeat against Juventus, which I think would be neat because it would give him a chance to grow or give Blue Lock an opportunity to divulge more into what it actually means to be a great football player. Now on to chapter 207. This is a chapter which really gave me the impression that I was right, that I was on the right way with my analysis in both of my videos. So this chapter is significantly called Two Pairs. And that's quite important. We get the pair of Ness and Kaiser and the pair of Nagi and Mikage contrasted or compared to each other in very interesting ways. So first on the Nagi front. So to start with, I'll just claim a massive W after my Nagi video, because that basically came true. Nagi and Mikage have reset back their relationship at the start of the story, where we see Mikage again pampering, caring for Nagi. He's drying his hair, he's bringing him drinks, very much like at the beginning in the first selection, where Mikage carried Nagi around and brought him foods. So again, the impression that Blue Lock is giving us is that Nagi is falling back to his old habits. Secondly, Mikage is encouraging Nagi to stop worrying about Isagi, to set his sights on a more concrete goal, to reach this, seemingly arbitrary number of a salary of 300,000 yen. Now this again, to me, seems to suggest that Nagi is not going to be striving for the top anymore. We can contrast this mindset to Isagi throughout the series, because every time he faces a wall, every time he finds an opponent who's more powerful than him, from Kira to Baro to Rin to Kaiser, he's constantly looking for ways to surpass them, to grow as a player. But when Nagi is faced with an insurmountable wall in the person of Isagi, he's cowering back. He's starting to set his sights on not the number one anymore. He's saying number one isn't really realistic anymore, and instead striving for the salary. So, just as I said in my Nagi video, I believe that Nagi is set on a negative character arc himself. He's going to show us the limits of talent, and he's not going to recover. And Mikage is actively encouraging him in the process. And then it's really interesting that Mikage and Ness are being very clearly paralleled. Both of them are really pampering their partner. Mikage bringing drinks and drying Nagi's hair. Ness bringing Kaiser his reading glasses. Now, Ness has really been set up as the most hateable new character in the Neo Egoist League Arc, right? So when it's suggested that Mikage is quite similar to Ness in this way, we might start asking questions about Mikage and what he's doing as well. But what I especially like about what Ness is doing is that he's giving us the first sign of Kaiser's weakness, the fact that Kaiser actually needs glasses. This is something that Kaiser seems to be actively hiding. He's never worn them in public. It's only in this private, intimate setting that he's willing to acknowledge his own shortcomings. And this is very much the first of many signs that Kaiser is not as powerful, not as infallible as he was first set up to be. This is something I talk about in my Neo Egoist League Arc video. Kaiser is, until now, being set up as the pinnacle of what Blue Lock is trying to reach, almost the perfect player. But now, after his 2 matches and the 2 times that he's been defeated by Isagi, we're seeing that he's a bit more vulnerable than he first seemed to be. But at this point, we see the true reason why Kaiser has to join the Neo Egoist League Arc. He has to prove that he's either the equal to Noah, or he has to find another club that's willing to make him their number 1 player. And what's especially fascinating is that the system that Kaiser has set up in the Neo Egoist League Arc is very much a mirror image of Noah's system in Bayern. As it turns out, the real Bayern team revolves entirely around Noah, and everyone else is standing in Noah's shadow, which is exactly the same thing that Kaiser set up in Bayern's Neo Egoist League Arc version. At the start of the arc, all the other players in Kaiser's team only served to allow Kaiser to score. And that's why Isagi is now such a threat to Kaiser, because Isagi has been chipping away at Kaiser's infallibility. He has on 2 occasions denied Kaiser goals, and so showing that Kaiser is not as indispensable as he's trying to project. And with that, Isagi is unknowingly putting a massive stumbling block in front of Kaiser's career. It's also telling that in chapter 209, Noah is telling off Kaiser in public for the first time. We see Kaiser's status slipping down further and further as more Blue Lock players start entering his field, his team. So this is all prompting Kaiser to finally become serious, and I'm really excited about what's going to happen here and how he's going to retaliate against Isagi from this point onwards. Let's move to chapter 208 and 209, and why I think that these chapters are setting us up or a dramatic loss against Juventus. First of all, even though Blue Lock has a lot of twists and turns, it's got a kind of predictable dramatic structure. Basically, there's two scenarios in Blue Lock. Either Isagi and his team start as underdogs, but then they overcome all the odds and win at the end, at the very last moment. Or Isagi's team is currently on a high, and then the narrative likes to take them down a peg. In other words, Blue Lock likes subverting our expectations. If we think they're gonna lose, they win. If we think they're gonna win, they lose. The best examples of this are in the second selection. So first, Isagi has his solo training and dramatically levels up. But then we're shown a wall that even with all his progress, there's suddenly Rin standing in front of him and Isagi is useless. So all that prompts Isagi to improve drastically, and then he scores a few much needed wins and grows as a player. But right when he has almost a dream team, he has Nagi, he has Baro, he has Chigiri. Again, they face off against Rin, and again, Rin devastates Isagi. He shows him his place. He shows him how much Isagi still has to grow. And I think that is where we're at in the Neo Egoist League arc as well. Chapter 208 is interesting here because it's really hyping up Isagi's growth. We see this training sequence, which is demonstrating all these key moments for Isagi over the course of the series. We see him use his direct shot, the weapon he developed at the end of the first selection. We see him use off-the-ball movement, the weapon he learned from Rin. And then he's also talking about his metavision and his manipulation of egocentrism. In other words, all this is showing how much Isagi has grown, how great of a player he's become over the course of the story. And then there's something that's absolutely unprecedented. Isagi has this puzzle-like realization, this impending upgrade, right before the match. Like, this just doesn't happen in Blue Lock. The way Blue Lock always works is that there's a hint at the start of the game about a weakness, something that Isagi has to realize, something that Isagi has to learn. Then they're in dire straits. They need to surpass all the odds, and that's when Isagi has this click. All the pieces come together, he gets an upgrade, and he overturns the odds. Think of it this way. What if Isagi would just have an upgrade at the start of the match, he'd mop the floor with Juventus, and then we go on? There'd be no dramatic tension, right? That'd be a really uninteresting match. So instead, Isagi is being set up as on the top of the world. He's playing with the big dogs. He's getting a massive upgrade, something that will let him guaranteed win against Kaiser. And so, the narrative has to drag him down. This is the moment where he's shown his limits. And it's not just this, it's also the team he's playing against. Because everything about the Juventus team we've seen so far is focusing on Isagi's shortcomings. This is something I also addressed in my Neo Egoist League Arc video. Back then, I argued the following. For one, Isagi has realized that right now, it's his physical abilities that are his bottleneck. So, I suspect that upgrading those will be his main objective for the third match. Now, I'm not quite sure about my conclusions here anymore, because I've become convinced that this will be a loss. So, instead of this leading Isagi to an upgrade, and it might still actually lead him to an upgrade, this will show him where he still has room to improve. Remember, over the course of the entire series, it's been a constant that Isagi lacks the physical abilities of many of his teammates and rivals, but he gets on because he's smarter, he outwits them, he sees more. But this time he faced with Baro, the player who from the very start of the series represents this kind of pinnacle of physical abilities, these abilities that Isagi just can't match no matter what he does. That's his major threat. But secondly, it's also that Raichi is suddenly brought back into the picture. And I really like this actually, because we haven't seen anything serious of him ever since the first selection. And although I enjoy his presence, it's kind of a shame to have a character around and then just do nothing. If that were the case, I would have been more happy if Raichi would have just been disqualified between the first and second selection. But Raichi again represents all the skills that Isagi doesn't have. He's the player who's great at one-on-ones, he's the player who's powerful, who's sticking with others, who can steal the ball. And it's not just Baro and Raichi, but we also get the best defender in all of Blue Lock. We get Oliver Aiku in the field. And finally, Nico is also on the field. So Nico is very much like Isagi. He's got the same kind of spatial awareness, he's the same type of smart player, but he is a defender. This is his area of expertise. So we're going to get the smart player defense versus smart player offense. And with all this together, I think this is going to present Isagi a challenge like he's never seen before. So what I expect is that this is the moment where Isagi falters, before he can then redeem himself and have this final cathartic victory in the match against Paris Saint-Germain. The match where he will not just defeat Kaiser, but also his main Blue Lock rival Rin. And finally, there's of course that Kaiser has now become serious as well. So Kaiser is taking on Isagi, there's enemies on all sides. I don't see this going well. Now, before I conclude, a few speculations on Isagi's upgrade, because obviously there is something coming. To be honest, I don't have any great ideas. My best guess is that this will be something like Rin's puppet master style manipulation, that Isagi might use his egocentrism to bait other players. Because note, Igaguri is saying that he's finding Raichi very easy to bait. He's able to manipulate Raichi with his dives or whatever he's doing. But Isagi is a smarter player, so he can start manipulating players on the playing field in much more interesting ways. But this doesn't quite line up, because the thing is, he's going to Kunigami of all players to ask for help, the king of physicality, and I'm not quite sure where that would lead. So I'd love to hear better ideas if you have them in the comments. This is what I've got, we'll see where we go. Now regardless, I am excited to see what Isagi's come up with, even if I think that this won't be enough to surpass Kaiser this game. So that's all for the interim, and I suspect that next week we'll be starting the Juventus match in earnest. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens from there. That's it for now, and if you like what you heard here, and if you want to continue hearing my thoughts about Blue Lock and some other manga, consider subscribing for more in-depth manga analysis every other week.